Welcome to When Women Preach. This podcast exists to empower AAPI and Latina women faith leaders. It was created and is hosted by Isaac, the innovative space for Asian American Christianity. My name is Cris Otonari, and I'm joined by our guest for this episode, the Reverend Sally Lee. And she also happened to be one of our panelists for our Thriving Congregations program. Sally, we're so excited and happy that you've been able to join us today. Welcome.
Okay. Well, thank you, Cris. I'm glad to be here.
So let's just jump right in a little bit on your background. You're a 2.5 generation Chinese American, and in church leadership, you have a unique perspective that you bring to both cultural identity and faith. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how your multicultural background shaped your approach to church planting and operations in your work, especially when you're working with diverse communities.
Yeah. Actually, I need to credit Pastoral Lab for helping me actually identify some of these things in my life because I thought it was just uniquely to me. So one of the things is just kind of being in the in-between spaces, like, you're kind of your own culture from your family, and then there's all these things in your external world. And I kind of grew up in white Midwest America in the suburbs, so everyone was always different than me. So one of the things I've had to learn is just how to maneuver in those in-between spaces, if it's different cultures or different people groups and different organizations. And I've always had to just listen for all the other different voices and different perspectives and not push my own point of view, which, if you're the majority in the culture, you just think your way is the way, right? So I
Yes.
never kind of had that perspective. So I think that's actually been helpful. That also shows up in a cultural behavior. Like if you know CQ, there's a kind of you can have a collective worldview or individual point of view. And it's different than being a people pleaser. But ultimately, I think I've always had to try and find a way that's for the greater good of the group. And I think that, that's also part of our culture, my family culture. And I think in general, a lot of Asian culture. And so just having that concern for the whole, either the whole family, the whole community, the whole organization, and always have that front and center greater than your own. So I think that's been really helpful. It's been really helpful in my work prior to being a pastor, just leading global cross-functional teams. So it's of different disciplines and in, different parts of the world, and leading them to an agreeable but effective strategy or problem solving. So I think, that can also be applied not only in the non-church, but it works really well with churches and planters.
I wonder if we can back up just a little bit because you mentioned the communal aspect of having an Asian background
Uh-huh.
is different from people pleasing. Can you say a
Mhm.
little bit more about that?
Well, when you're people pleasing, you're just trying to please everybody around you, right? So you may lose yourself in it,
Mhm.
and you may lose track of what is the actual mission of what the community is trying to achieve. And this happens a lot, I feel like, with people in churches. You just want to please everyone. You don't want anyone to leave the pews. You want everyone to enjoy what they're doing. You want them to like the music, and you may forget, we're here ultimately to bring people in the presence of God for worship, for instance, in churches. So,
Mm.
yeah, I
Okay.
think that's the difference. You want to hear their perspectives, but you want to see how can you bring them in unity to do what's the greater mission.
Yeah, I think I honed in on that part because as a current facilitator of a pastoral lab cohort, I'm finding from my own background and some of the pastores in the cohort that
Mhm.
we have grown up to be kind of people pleasers, and we do kind of attribute that somewhat to our heritage and kind of how we were raised. So I found that to be really interesting that to make that distinction, also seeing the beauty in having a communal kind of collective faith. I love
Mhm.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think also, when you're in a community, you have to learn to give up your preferences. And this is so much a biblical teaching, right? But you can't lose yourself. And so one thing Pastoral Labs helped me is realize, I can't be effective in ministry or doing any work for God unless I am and I live out who he's created me to uniquely be. So you gotta have both. You gotta know to give up your preferences, but you gotta, follow God's lead.
Yeah. That sounds like a thin line sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about something that is really exciting that you've been sharing a little bit in some of our groups, and that's the Dinner Church Collective. This is a recent project of yours. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Like, how did it start and what motivated you, and what are you finding through that?
Yeah, so I actually did dinner church when I was in Detroit before I moved to Seattle. But the history that I've learned is, the dinner church concept actually started in Seattle, and they called it community dinners. And they had a goal to, have a community dinner in every neighborhood in Seattle. And not only just to have that dinner, but it's a welcoming place of belonging, particularly in Seattle, where I think it's like 45% unchurched people. And in the city, in the urban areas, there's a lot of, homeless people just struggling in, especially after COVID. So they really found, that was where the dinner church, the community dinners actually were really working, to really serve the underserved people, the unchurched people. And their goal was to try and help and use this community dinner concept to really bring people closer to Jesus by just giving them a place to belong. It's really
Mm,
almost what Jesus first did and when he began his ministries, right? He didn't start telling everybody, here's all the rules and you got to do all these things or you're not going to see the Father. He just said, come and see. Come and see, come and rest in me. And that's really the concept of doing the community dinners. It's the first step to kind of inviting people to see Jesus.
mm.
Mhm.
How does that work? Do you have leaders? How do you find the people to attend dinners? Is there like a maximum number of people? Is it more like a dinners for eight kind of thing? Or, yeah.
Well, so I also have a role in coaching church planters in my denomination, and I would say the hardest piece of work and the one that takes the longest time is finding your people that God has led you to. I mean, that could take years. And for me, I had started serving at the shelter in my neighborhood. And I just found myself just loving on the people, just literally sharing the love of Jesus, no
Mm,
judgment, no telling them you got to believe in Jesus or, I'm from church. They just knew me as Sally that plays a little piano and sits down and talks to them and listens to them and sometimes offer them prayers. So I just found the Holy Spirit really touched my heart. And I mean, I just love being with the people. And that's where it began. And from that, I learned that was just being present with the people. There's a name for it called Ministry of Presence. And that's really what chaplaincy is all about. So I went to get my chaplaincy endorsement and kind of one thing led to another. And I met some other church partners and we had the same idea, like how can we better serve our people at the shelter? What can we do? And I had in mind thinking, well, maybe dinner church would work. And so did another pastor that was serving at the shelter, unbeknownst to me. And together
mm,
we discovered, I mean, it's a God thing. We
yeah.
discovered together, God had placed that on our hearts. And so, like, I swear, within a week, we said we're partners. And the dinner church community, through my work in chaplaincy, I actually had to shadow people that were doing that. And when they discovered what I was doing, they said, hey, you should do it officially. Do dinner church and we will fund you for a year. You just do it. Right? Yeah, and then
Wow.
the next thing was to find the partner, and I just stumbled on, my partner, like, within a week of them giving me that offer, and so, with my other church partner and the shelter also was on board with providing more spiritual services to the people coming, we just kicked off the dinner church. Yep.
So, what I'm hearing is it sounds like there's no hidden agenda because I think sometimes the church, when we try to go out into the community,
Mhm.
we often have an agenda, right? Like, we want to serve you, but we want to bring you into the church. Like, you must, become a follower of Jesus. It sounds like it's very missional. Like, you're there just to love the people and, as you said,
Mhm.
create a space of belonging.
Yeah. So we were really conscious not to do the bait and switch,
Yeah.
especially in our context. So we do call it community dinner church, where I think other areas may just say community dinner or free food or whatever. But because we were already in that space of the shelter, where providing food and some other services were already a thing, we wanted people to know this is something special. And we actually, our little slogan says, "Come for a meal and find a place of hope and belonging." And we always
Mhm.
say up front, you're welcome and we love having you here. It's just like inviting friends and family over for dinner. We're going to share a story of hope with you. And my hope comes from Jesus. So I'm going to share you a Jesus story. And don't feel obligated that this is why we brought you here. We just want to have dinner with you. And we'd love it if you'd stay for the story. So we don't hide it. But yeah, we do insert the story. And it's a different kind of format than like if you went to church, a traditional church where you got like 20, 30-minute sermon, which is talking at you. The format is really a very short Jesus story, and we use a simple version of the Bible, and we just focus on telling stories from the gospel and providing a personal application. So I'll tell them a story of mine. So I'm actually sharing my story as well.
That's really neat. So from an operational perspective, it's obviously different than like church planting. Your model's very different for the church dinners, but how do you see like challenges, different, maybe unique challenges and opportunities coming up with this model versus like a church planting model?
Well, I think the challenges I hear from most of the teams trying to do this is people have to make a shift, especially if they've only grown up knowing a traditional model of church, which in the US is probably in a relatively affluent suburban neighborhood, and you only meet on Sundays and it's all about that. You really need to make the shift. So the storytelling, like I said, is in a relational way. It's not that preaching at your people that have come to your building to hear you. It's got to be very relational and be present like Jesus was. It's not about evangelizing or preaching at people or just feeding them or giving them money or whatever. You need to be present and relational.
Hmm.
And there is an element of sentness because the original concept is you go where the people are. And that's what Jesus did. You don't tell them to come to your fancy building and follow all your rules. You go to them and you relate to them however they are, wherever they are. So that's a shift. And then it really is a matter of the heart. And we talk about ministry sometimes as head, hand, and hearts, or head is
Mhm.
you know all the knowledge. You went, if you're a pastor, you went to seminary or whatever, you got all your theology and all that stuff. And so that's the head stuff. The hands is usually turns up in a church as I'm running all these programs, right? But it's the heart. That the heart is really the main event here. And it's loving like Jesus loved. The way you show people who Jesus is like showing his presence in you. And so it's how you relate to them and love them ultimately as Jesus did.
Yeah,
So
that's really beautiful.
that's the challenge of making this shift. Because even though I think most people in church know to do that, they aren't actually making this shift.
And I feel like it's uncomfortable. If you've been
Hmm.
in church for a long time and you've been serving in ministry, it is kind of counterintuitive.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think about times when I was running programs like Alpha, and what we were trying to do was just create a safe space for people to come wherever they're at and just ask whatever questions or just sit and have a meal and listen to other
Yeah.
people and not jump in and want to try to like save them or,
Yeah.
like beat the
Hmm.
gospel into people. And
Hmm.
that was really hard. Like I had to tell certain volunteers, like, I'm sorry, this is not a good fit for you
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they would just go into apologetics mode. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, and we find a lot of times when people start a dinner church, the people that come to serve, they just wanna stand behind the food line and pass the food out. They don't wanna sit with the people or talk to the people, but that is the key thing. You're there to sit with the people, be present with the people. It's not a feeding program.
Do you provide training for your volunteers then on how to have conversations with people who especially are underserved, underhoused, unhoused? Because
Mhm,
that's like, the quick questions that come to mind with surface level chat are
mhm.
usually very like inappropriate to lead off with if somebody
Mhm.
is, for instance, unhoused?
Yeah. Well, the basic instruction is I tell our people is make friends. Go make friends. It's as simple as that. You're not there to evangelize or any and we do give a I have a roles of the table host and it talks about how to be present and things like that. But the basic is just if you can think about how would you make friends with someone? I mean, anyone can do this.
Yeah,
Make friends, find something common you have, you're sharing, they're sharing. It's two ways, it's not one way. But yeah, there are other training, and locally we have another organization that deals with homelessness, and they have various types of training that we can offer our people.
that's great.
Yeah.
Something that comes to mind as we're talking about this is when I think of our church, the church that I currently serve, we are seeing more people come and just kind of check out church who may be unchurched or dechurched,
Hmm.
who have maybe gone through some wounding. And we're trying to figure out exactly this, like how to create safe spaces for people to just experience belonging without the bait and switch thing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and it feels hard. So I'm wondering if that
Hmm.
would work, if this model would work in.
So, yeah. So one of the elements is that you're going. So the beauty of how my church started, I just did it where people were already gathering and sort of already felt this was their space to come to and be a community. So it's just to add that extra layer of spiritual care and provide a special meal for them in a special space and people that will just sit and listen. So that's the beauty of going. There's no uncomfortable about having people uncomfortable coming into your house. You're going there. And so I think that really helps.
Mhm.
And and it lowers the barrier of entry because also that they don't think they're going to a church because they're coming to your house and then it's your house with all, all the whatever they're thinking church is. That can be overwhelming and that could be a barrier. So you take that barrier away. You go where they are. Ideally, it's a place where they're already gathering and feel like this is, a place that they frequent or they belong or they want to build community. And you start with the just come and see, come and rest attitude.
I love that. Come and see. That's been a phrase that I've been taking to heart recently and doing a lot of what you're doing, just going out and serving in the neighborhood around our
Hmm.
church and dwelling with the people. And there's some beauty in that that you can't get in, I feel like, any other way, whether it's serving a meal or,
Hmm.
yeah, just hanging out with people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's also, I think, so in terms of opportunities and benefits of this model is I really find it's not just serving, the people that you're going to. It's really, really great for discipling your own team, your own church people. I can't tell you how many times I've heard because I went to go help them or, teach them about Jesus, but you know who got blessed? It was me.
Right.
Just seeing the Holy Spirit at work. Like you may not see that in your own church with your own people that you see every Sunday or whatever, when you see that working with people you don't really know that well, maybe, and in a different environment, I mean, it's just amazing and it's a blessing to the people that serve.
Yeah. If you could have a word for especially ministry leaders who might be interested in something like this, but the words you use that really struck me are ministry of presence. In my pastoral ministry classes, we talk about that a lot.
Hmm.
And yet, when you're in a pastoral role, you have so many things to think about. You're multitasking all the time. And sometimes, like, the basic parts of the relationship kinda go move to the bottom because you're so busy running around wearing different hats. Um, what is a word of advice or encouragement you might give ministry leaders to take the time to slow down and, like, that matters too, just being present with people?
Well, that to me, that matters first because Jesus has to be at the center. And the only way, you're going to share Jesus with people is if you're full of the Holy Spirit. That means you're spending time with God, right? And Jesus is at the center, and then you're overflowing. So it just becomes natural. And all the other things almost just don't matter. that's the word of advice. Keep Jesus at the center, not making
Mm,
sure my pews are full, not making sure, I got so many new whatever you're measuring, finances, program success. If
yeah.
you're full of the Spirit, it's going to overflow so that you're sharing that with others.
Yeah. That's great. But kind of going back to your church planting and part of your role, how do you coach church planners to create sustainable and thriving communities rather than just launching new congregations? Kind of related to what we were just talking about.
Mhm. Yeah, so I mean, just repeating what I said before, that Jesus has to be at the center. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I talked about this at one of our pastoral lab retreats as well. A business in the secular world, we may know how to market things and sell things, and the center of that, the target is probably sales or profit margin or something like that, market share. When you're doing God's work, Jesus has to be at the center. Yeah. And what he told us, it's not about finding the perfect building and having the perfect musicians and all of these things. It's to do what we were commanded to do, to love God, love God's people, make disciples and tell everyone about Jesus, be witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, and to the ends of the earth. So that's got to be number one. And then when you think about thriving, I get this asked a lot. How do you know it's a healthy church or a thriving church? And then, oh, well, the books look good on the financials,
Yeah.
all our seats are filled. But that's not it. A thriving community is one that is making disciples that make disciples, one who's loving Jesus and teaching people how to share that love of Jesus. That's thriving. So that's got to be one. Uh, and some might call it discipleship. But discipleship is not a Bible study or a program. It has to be a way of life and at the center of all you do. And that you do this also in community. The tendency for people that are drawn to church planting, especially probably in the past decades, is very attractional, right? And it's all down to
Yes.
the one personality. But that's not how Jesus taught us to do this, right? We're to do this in community.
Yeah.
And this is also, I think, what's really good about being Asian, right? Because we believe in
We know.
community. Right? So
Yeah.
so when they have to build a team. My church planners cannot just go off on their own. They have to build a team, and they have to be conscious of, the gifts of the Spirit, because, we were given different gifts. And as a church, we are to function as a body using all of the gifts. So you have to have a team. We don't go alone. So that's the second thing. And then I think there's so much things we can do on our own and, all kinds of things. But with prayer, you have to have prayer and faith in God's provision if you're going to do God's work, not your own thing. And then I think finally, God is a God of interruptions. So you may have the perfect plan. You may think you're knowing what you're doing. And so I tell my planters, you're going to get interrupted.
Mm,
So, that's why also I have that rule, a rule of life, to make sure you're full of the Spirit, because you need that to maneuver your way through these interruptions. And we know, since God is the God of interruptions, he's interrupting you most probably because he wants to make sure you are doing his plan, you
mm.
know, and it's his will and you're obedient to that, not just of your own thing. So yeah, be understanding of that, and be ready to evaluate and adjust as you go.
So good. That is so good. You make it sound so simple. Anyone could do this, right?
Well, because the funny thing, I coached the planters, and I didn't go about trying to plant a church at the shelter. It really, followed my own lesson. I was just trying to love on them. And one thing led to another. I had the provision from God by the dinner church organization saying they'd fund this thing. I had a provision like 2 days later. God sent me a partner because I wasn't supposed to do it alone.
Mm,
And yeah, and so we just see blessed. I have a volunteer team that's really wonderful. We don't really have to train them too much to make those shifts. They're there. It's amazing. I mean, that can't be me. That's all God.
that's awesome. I think that's how we know that it's truly a calling, right?
Exactly.
When God puts all these things in
Yeah.
place,
There's
like,
there's
"Oh,
no way I
okay."
could, design that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's end with something fun. I was able to see you a few weeks ago
Awesome.
at a retreat, and we had a fun time on the rooftop of the retreat center, and I
Mhm.
found a hidden talent. You are an
Oh,
amazing singer,
oh my gosh.
and yes, you may not want me to publicize this to the whole world, but yeah, so that was really fun. Do you like to sing? And if singing is not really your thing, what do you like to do in your free time that brings you joy?
Well, I love music. And so that's how God reeled me in. And actually that is how I first really understood the gospel and
Mm.
understood what Jesus did to me. It was singing the Easter cantata like 100 times over. I couldn't read my Bible, but when I finally sang those words, which were scripture that he was preparing a
Mm,
place for me, I mean, I just broke down in tears. I just got it. So
mm.
music just speaks to me in that way. So I love all kinds of music.
That's
Mhm.
awesome. I heard recently that in the secular world that people who sing regularly have lower levels of cortisol and,
Oh.
stress, and they have a lot more joy. And I've only recently kind of reconnected with some other genres of music because I borrowed a whole bunch of vinyls from my parents and set it up really nicely so that I'll actually see them and listen to them, and I'm,
Mhm.
singing away in the kitchen, while I'm cooking, and it's, bringing me a lot of joy, so
Yeah. Yeah, I do. So God knows that's how it touches me. So I often hear if I'm struggling with something, worship me, worship me. I'm like, okay. So I'll go to the
Mhm.
piano and I'll worship him. And it works. It just brings a sense of peace and to me and that I know he's with me. Yeah.
Yeah, another hidden talent, piano
Yeah.
playing. 'Cause we were just singing and dancing a little bit, but well, Sally, it's been so great to have you on When Women Preach. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to hang out with us today, and it's always fun, having a chat with you. Thank you for being a
Thank you,
guest.
Chris. All right.